viewpoint on that?
I mean, I think I said what I said. I think it's kind of common sense. And I think I'll always believe in that. I think it's really important to protect children, and that's little girls who are also involved in that category. And so I stand on what I said, and I always believe that.
I said what I said. 5 words, no retreat, and no attempt to soften the message. But the biggest question is not whether Sophie Cunningham stands by her position. It is what happens when that position collides with the league's politics, her team's ambitions, and the growing spotlight surrounding Indiana.
Caitlin Clark, big-time double-double. And before the game, Sophie Cunningham was asked about her comments that she made where she stood up for women's sports, keeping biological men and boys out of girls' locker rooms, women's locker rooms. And she was asked about it. And Sophie Cunningham did not back down at all.
That is what made this night bigger than a routine regular season blowout. Before the opening tip, Cunningham was already at the center of a national debate. Then the Fever walked onto the court and produced one of their most explosive offensive performances of the season. Those two stories may look separate, but they are connected by the same underlying reality. Indiana has become the team everybody watches, analyzes, criticizes, and uses as a proxy for arguments much larger than basketball. Cunningham was asked to expand on comments about protecting opportunities and spaces for girls in sports. She did not accuse a specific player, identify a particular incident, or announce some new campaign. She repeated the principle she had already stated and framed it around children. People will disagree strongly about that position. That is inevitable. But there is an important distinction between disagreeing with what an athlete says and demanding that an athlete pretend she never said it. Cunningham chose clarity over damage control. And later, we need to examine the part of this story that could create the most immediate consequences for Indiana. It was not Cunningham's answer. It was a whistle involving Caitlin Clark that pushed her to the edge of an automatic suspension.
She did not back down. Bravo. Bravo. Now, I'm sure a lot of us are wondering about potential fallout around this. I don't know yet how this is going to go. I know there was a point in the second half. People in the chat, the Ben Daniel chat, go subscribe. People were wondering out loud, had she been benched in the second half of the game, but she finally was brought in and played pretty much the rest of the game at that point. But she did not back down. She did not try to talk herself out of it, talk her way out.
The reaction from the host was unambiguous. He praised Cunningham for refusing to back down and immediately wondered whether there would be fallout. That speculation needs to be handled carefully. There is no verified evidence in this source that Cunningham was punished, secretly disciplined, or benched because of her comments. She eventually entered the second half and remained in the rotation. Reading intent into every substitution would be irresponsible without stronger evidence. Coaches change lineups for matchups, fatigue, foul situations, defensive assignments, or the simple fact that one combination is playing well. Unless Indiana or somebody directly involved says otherwise, a stretch on the bench is only a stretch on the bench. Still, the concern did not appear from nowhere. Professional leagues are commercial institutions. They answer to sponsors, broadcasters, players, fans, and advocacy groups that may hold completely different views. When an athlete enters a polarizing cultural debate, every decision involving that athlete can suddenly become part of the public argument. That is why Cunningham's wording matters. She did not ramble into an avoidable controversy. She was asked a direct question, gave a direct answer, and accepted that people would judge it. Agree or disagree, that is more transparent than issuing a statement so carefully processed that it communicates nothing. The larger test now belongs to the league. Can it distinguish between a player expressing a controversial opinion and a player violating an actual rule? Those are not the same thing. A professional league can condemn harassment, enforce workplace standards, and protect its employees without pretending that every athlete must share one approved political perspective. The fairest standard is viewpoint neutral. Establish clear conduct rules, apply them consistently, and do not invent discipline after public pressure arrives. If Cunningham broke no written policy, then disagreement should remain disagreement.
Now, right here, double technicals for Sanaya Rivers and Caitlin Clark, who exchanged words after a Connecticut foul. That's 7 technicals for Caitlin Clark. One more, and she will be suspended. I hope they rescind this one because I thought it was complete bullshit.
Then the basketball delivered a controversy with consequences that were much easier to calculate. Caitlin Clark and Sanaya Rivers exchanged words after a Connecticut foul, and both received technical fouls. According to the broadcast commentary in this source, that gave Clark 7 technicals, leaving her 1 away from an automatic suspension. That is not a theoretical concern. One more emotional reaction, one quick exchange, or one official interpreting a gesture the wrong way could remove Indiana's most influential playmaker from a game. The technicals shown here may still be reviewed or rescinded, but until that happens, the Fever have to treat the situation as real. Clark cannot stop competing with emotion. That aggression is part of what makes her effective. But she also cannot allow opponents to bait her into exchanges that create a competitive advantage for them. Every team scouting Indiana now knows the number. A defender can hold a little longer, talk after the whistle, crowd her landing area, or test how much frustration she will show. The goal does not have to be drawing a technical immediately. It can simply be making her think about the officials instead of the next possession. Indiana's responsibility is twofold. The organization should challenge any technical it considers unsupported, and the coaching staff should make sure Clark understands the risk without draining the personality from her game. Because the irony is obvious. On a night when Clark looked completely in command of the offense, the most dangerous threat to her availability came after the whistle.
You see that score, 123-88. The Indiana Fever set a record for points in the first half of a game with 70 tonight. Wow. Yeah, and Caitlin Clark started this game fast. She never really took her foot off the pedal at all. And I got to tell you, if teammates could have made some shots, she might have had 16, 17, 18 assists tonight.
Now look at what Indiana did while all of that noise surrounded the team. The Fever scored 70 points in the first half, identified in the broadcast as a franchise record for a first half, and built a 123-88 advantage by the time this segment was recorded. This was not a game decided by one late run. Indiana overwhelmed Connecticut early and kept creating quality shots. Clark set the pace, but the shape of her performance mattered as much as the point total. She attacked before the defense could settle, stretched coverage beyond the three-point line, and repeatedly found teammates after forcing extra help. The host suggested she could have reached 16, 17, or even 18 assists if more open shots had fallen. That number is hypothetical, so it should not be treated as an official missed opportunity. But the observation reveals something important. Clark's passing impact exceeded the 11 assists recorded in the box score. Assists measure completed possessions. They do not capture every accurate pass that produces an open miss, every early outlet that bends the defense, or every relocation caused by the threat of a long three. This was the version of Indiana that has always looked possible on paper. Clark manipulates the first defender. Aaliyah Boston becomes the interior decision-maker. Kelsey Mitchell attacks a defense already tilted out of position. Cunningham brings spacing, toughness, and secondary creation. When the ball moves through that structure, Indiana does not merely have 3 talented scorers. It has an offense in which each player makes the next player harder to guard.
The big three had a big game. So let's start with Caitlin, 27 points, 8 of 13, 5 of 9 from three-point range, 11 assists, 2 boards, 1 steal, 1 block shot. Wow, a big, big game. And she's had 2 massive games out of the last 3 games. Aaliyah Boston, 22, 10 for 14, 6 rebounds, 5 assists, 3 steals. Kelsey Mitchell, 23, 9 of 16, 3 of 6 from three-point range, 4 boards, and 2 assists. Kelsey Mitchell actually contributed in other ways.
The numbers confirm how balanced the damage was. Clark finished with 27 points and 11 assists, while shooting 8 of 13 from the field and 5 of 9 from 3. Boston added 22 points on 10 of 14 shooting, with 6 rebounds, 5 assists, and 3 steals. Mitchell scored 23, made 3 of 6 from deep, and contributed 4 rebounds and 2 assists, that is 72 points from the central trio. But reducing their impact to scoring would miss why the performance was so difficult to stop. Boston's 5 assists are especially significant. When the Fever use her as more than a traditional post scorer, the defense cannot simply collapse and wait for her to force a shot. She can catch in the middle of the floor, read the weak side, and punish rotations. Mitchell's additional contributions also matter. She has long been capable of creating points against almost any matchup, but Indiana's ceiling rises when she rebounds, relocates, and makes the extra pass instead of functioning only as the final shot taker. And Clark's efficiency changes everything. 27 points on 13 field goal attempts is radically different from reaching the same total through a high-volume, low-efficiency night. Connecticut could not simply wait for her to shoot Indiana out of rhythm. She was converting from deep, finishing inside the arc, and creating for others. This is why the Big Three label finally felt earned rather than promotional. Each star occupied a different part of the defense, and none of them had to disappear for another to succeed. But there is a warning inside that success. Indiana cannot assume every opponent will defend the same way or allow the same transition opportunities. The real test comes when a stronger defense takes away the first option and forces the Fever to win through counters.
Let's go, Caitlin Clark shooting a rock.
She is attacking the basket.
And she just drives in. Nice little drive. And hits the little floater. That's good stuff.
These possessions show the first counter. Clark was not living exclusively behind the three-point line. She attacked the basket and used the floater before the interior defender could fully commit. That shot is essential because defenses increasingly want to chase her off the arc and funnel her toward size. If Clark reaches the paint but has only 2 choices, force a layup or pass, the defense can anticipate her. The floater creates a third answer. It punishes the big for sitting too deep, arrives before a trailing defender can recover, and does not require Clark to absorb maximum contact on every drive. That may sound like a small technical detail, but it changes the geometry of the entire possession. Once the drop defender steps higher to contest the floater, Boston has more room behind the play. Once the weak side defender tags Boston, the corner shooter becomes available. Once the perimeter defender worries about being beaten off the dribble, Clark gets a cleaner step back. Great offensive players do not need dozens of unrelated moves. They need several actions that force contradictory defensive responses. Guard the 3 tightly, and she drives. Drop toward the rim, and she floats it. Send a second defender, and she finds Boston or Mitchell. Connecticut spent the first half choosing between bad options.
Oh my gosh, Caitlin Clark is cooking. Come here, Sanaya, step back. Oh my gosh.
Give that guy your map.
Curling off the screen. Come here. Curry 3.
Bang, C22. What's up, Venom? Good to see you back, man. No doubt about it. His channel is growing. Talked to Venom tonight before the game. Good stuff. Good stuff. Caitlin again. Way out. Bam. Knocks it down from way out.
Then came the shots that stretch a defense from uncomfortable to helpless. Clark used the screen, created separation, and launched from well beyond the standard three-point line. A few moments later, she connected from deep again. The value of those shots extends beyond 3 points on the scoreboard. Most pick-and-roll defenses are built around specific landmarks. The big defender expects to meet the ball near the arc or below it. The guard expects to recover within a normal shooting window. Clark's range moves the decision several feet farther from the basket. That extra distance creates additional space for the screener to roll. It forces the second defender to reveal the coverage earlier. It also increases the cost of a mistake, because Clark needs only a brief opening to shoot. This is where the conversation about using her off the ball requires balance. Clark can be dangerous as a movement shooter, and Indiana should not abandon that weapon. But using her away from the ball should complement her control of the offense, not replace it for long stretches. The game becomes easier for everybody when she initiates enough possessions to establish the defensive pressure. After the defense has been stretched and forced to communicate through repeated screens, Indiana can move her off the ball and attack the confusion. Reverse that order too often, and the Fever risk turning an elite creator into somebody waiting for a pass that may never arrive. The best version is unpredictable. Clark handles, then she gives it up, relocates, receives a return pass, and attacks a defense that has already changed assignments. That is not taking the ball out of her hands. It is making sure the defense never knows when the ball is coming back.
Caitlin Clark, let's see it. This is going to be an and one. She's going to drive. Pull up another little floater. And the and one. That was nice. Caitlin Clark was on her game tonight, folks.
The next clip adds another layer. Contact did not stop the attack. Clark drove, pulled up for another floater, finished the play, and earned the additional free throw. That matters because physicality has been one of the recurring questions around her game. Opponents know that allowing her to operate comfortably is dangerous, so they crowd her, bump her through screens, and try to make every route expensive. The answer cannot be to avoid contact completely. It has to be learning where contact is likely, keeping balance, and turning aggression into fouls or defensive breakdowns. She appeared increasingly comfortable doing that in this game. Instead of rushing because a defender entered her space, she maintained control long enough to choose the finish. There is also a health component. The source describes her as becoming healthier and references 2 massive performances in 3 games. Indiana has to protect that progress without removing the rhythm that produces it. Minutes management is not only about the final total. It is about when those minutes occur, whether Clark can stay warm, and whether extended breaks interrupt her feel for the game. A player can technically remain under a medical limit while still being used in a pattern that makes performance harder. The coaching staff must coordinate competitive needs with medical guidance. That becomes complicated when the player believes she can continue and the medical staff sees risks that are not visible from the stands. But this game offered the clearest argument for letting Clark control meaningful stretches while she is available. She was not merely scoring. She was organizing every layer of the offense.
Man, I got to tell you, games are getting a little funner to watch. Now, they were up so much in the second half that, yeah, at times it kind of drug on a little bit, but it was an entertaining first half of basketball. I got to give it up. Caitlin Clark seems to be taking over and keeping the rock and playing playmaker and dynamic point guard. I love it. Now, she's still taking off the ball at times, yada, yada, yada. I can't stand that.
The host admitted the second half dragged because the margin had grown so large, but his central observation was correct. Clark looked more like the primary playmaker and dynamic point guard Indiana needs. That phrase, primary playmaker, is the key to the entire performance. There has always been a temptation to discuss Clark as though the choice is binary. Either she dominates the ball on every possession, or she becomes an off-ball decoy. Real championship offenses are more sophisticated than that. The Fever need a hierarchy without becoming predictable. Clark should be the player who most often determines the initial advantage. Boston should punish the defense after that advantage is created. Mitchell should attack gaps and close possessions when the defense scrambles. That does not mean Clark must dribble for 20 seconds. It means the offense should regularly pass through the decision-making pressure she creates. Her 27-11 line illustrates the difference. She was aggressive enough to force Connecticut to respect her scoring, but she did not become trapped inside a scoring duel. When help came, the ball moved. When defenders stayed home, she attacked. This balance is also why evaluating her only through turnovers can be misleading. High-level creators attempt passes that stationary guards never see. Some mistakes are careless and must be reduced. Others are the cost of pressuring windows that eventually generate easy baskets. The goal is not zero risk. The goal is intelligent risk, where the expected reward justifies the attempt. Indiana looked closer to that balance in this game than it has during stretches when the offense becomes divided into isolated possessions.
That's big time. That is big. Those kind of numbers will win you the most valuable player in the league. And look, the announcers tonight, they kept bringing up Kelsey Mitchell. Kelsey Mitchell's having a hell of a year. But I think it's time we start talking a little bit about Caitlin Clark for MVP and all this. Right? It's just like we were talking about with Sophie Cunningham in the sixth person of the year. We need to start getting Caitlin Clark into the MVP consideration.
Now we reach the claim that will create the loudest argument. Should Caitlin Clark be discussed as a most valuable player candidate? The answer depends on what discussed means. Should she automatically be declared the favorite because of one dominant night? No. An MVP case must survive comparison across an entire season. It should include availability, efficiency, team success, defensive impact, consistency, and performance against top competition. Should she enter the serious conversation when she produces games like this and drives one of the league's most watched, most scrutinized offenses? Absolutely. Those positions are not contradictory. Acknowledging a legitimate candidacy is different from awarding the trophy. The strongest argument for Clark is not merely that she scored 27 points. It is that her scoring and passing combined to control the game. 11 assists mean she directly created at least 22 additional points, and some of those possessions may have produced threes. Add that creation to her own scoring, and her fingerprints cover a massive share of Indiana's offense. Her influence also changes opponents before the game begins. Defenses alter pickup points, screen coverages, transition priorities, and help assignments because of her range and passing. That strategic distortion is part of value, even when it does not appear in a single box score column. The counter-argument is equally important. MVP debates cannot be built only around visibility or popularity. Other elite players may produce better defensive seasons, stronger records, more consistent availability, or comparable offensive output with fewer mistakes. That is why the conversation should remain evidence-based. Clark does not need exaggerated praise that ignores every weakness. Her best case comes from the actual basketball: efficient scoring, elite creation, improved interior attack, and a team offense that becomes significantly more dangerous when she controls the action.
All right, those numbers that she's starting to really put up, now that she's getting more and more healthy, those are starting to look a lot like MVP kind of numbers. I mean, some huge games. What, player of the week last week? 27 and 11 tonight? I mean, that's big time. That's big time. And that's an all-around game, not just a dynamic score. That's an all-around game. And she seems to be throwing in a block shot and, a steal or two a night.
The host pointed to the recent run, the player of the week recognition he referenced, and Clark's ability to contribute beyond scoring through assists, steals, and blocked shots. This is where the MVP discussion becomes more interesting than a popularity contest. Offensive production gets attention, but voters often separate close candidates by asking who influences the most phases of winning. Clark does not need to become the league's best defender. She needs to remain engaged, compete within the scheme, create occasional disruptive plays, and avoid becoming a target opponents can exploit possession after possession. The steal and block totals mentioned here are small, but they suggest activity. More important is whether she executes rotations, communicates through screens, and maintains effort when her shot is not falling. That last condition will determine how durable her candidacy becomes. Superstars are not judged only by their best nights. They are judged by what they provide when the easy offense disappears. Can Clark manage a slower game against switching defenders? Can she create efficient possessions when the transition attack is unavailable? Can she protect the ball late against aggressive traps? Can Indiana continue winning if the three-point shot is not falling? Those questions are not attacks. They are the standards that come with entering an MVP conversation. And this is where the earlier technical foul returns as more than a side story. Availability is part of value. An automatic suspension caused by accumulated technicals could damage Indiana in the standings and become an avoidable mark against her season. Clark has every right to demand fair treatment and react when she believes a call is wrong. But the strategic response is to make opponents pay on the next possession, not give them a chance to remove her from a future game. Indiana should also take responsibility. Team leaders can intervene before exchanges escalate. Coaches can communicate with officials. Veteran teammates can separate players after the whistle. Protecting Clark does not only mean asking referees to call contact. It means protecting her from situations that endanger her availability.
Now, we'll have to see how this team does as they get later in the season, stiffer and stiffer competition. We will have to see. But I got to admit, I like what I've seen the last 3 games. I have. I'm going to keep it real.
The host closed by acknowledging the remaining uncertainty. Tougher competition, later season pressure, and the need to see whether this version of Indiana can hold. That is the correct place to land, because one blowout can reveal a blueprint without proving the blueprint is permanent. The Fever showed what happens when their 3 central stars complement one another. Clark bent the defense from the perimeter and in the paint. Boston converted efficiently and created for teammates. Mitchell scored without becoming disconnected from the rest of the offense. They also showed why this team will remain under extraordinary pressure. Cunningham's public comments place Indiana inside a cultural argument that will not disappear after one press conference. Clark's 7th technical places the team 1 incident away from potentially losing its engine for a game. The MVP discussion raises expectations from promising to contending. Those pressures can fracture a team or sharpen it. The real answer to why this night matters is not simply that Indiana crushed Connecticut or that Cunningham refused to retract her opinion. It is that the Fever are becoming too relevant to avoid conflict. Every quote becomes national content. Every whistle becomes a referendum on officiating. Every substitution becomes a potential conspiracy. Every strong Clark performance becomes an MVP argument. That environment can become exhausting, especially if the organization reacts emotionally to every cycle of outrage. Indiana's best defense is clarity. Be clear about the offensive hierarchy. Let Clark initiate enough possessions to maximize her playmaking while still using her off the ball as a weapon. Be clear about discipline. Challenge technical fouls when the evidence supports an appeal. But make sure players understand the consequences of after-the-whistle exchanges. Be clear about public speech. Athletes can hold personal opinions. Critics can challenge those opinions. And the league should enforce written conduct standards rather than public mood. Be clear about the standard for MVP consideration. Judge Clark by production, impact, availability, and team success, not by resentment toward her popularity or blind devotion to it. The next stage is harder. Opponents will study this film and adjust. They will switch more actions, force the ball away from Clark, crowd Boston's catches, and make Mitchell defend on the other end. They will also test Indiana's composure because the technical foul situation is now public knowledge. That creates a choice for the Fever. They can become distracted by every controversy surrounding them, or they can use the attention as evidence that their games carry consequences again. Sophie Cunningham has already made her choice about the public debate. She said she stands by her position. Clark made her statement through the game itself. 27 points, 11 assists, efficient shooting, and control of an offense that erupted for 70 points before halftime. Now the audience has to choose which story carries more weight. Is Indiana's biggest threat the cultural and officiating controversy following the team? Or is the larger story that Clark, Boston, and Mitchell may finally be discovering a formula capable of overwhelming the league? Tell me which side you are on in the comments. And if you want honest analysis without pretending every complicated story has a simple answer, like the video and subscribe.